our colleague Mike Fryer, who passed away on Sunday. It's a day of a lot of sadness and heaviness here at the county. The county staff who knew and worked with him for so many community members who did, and just thought we could start by just taking a moment of silence for prayer or thought to hold his spirit, in our hearts as we get started. So please join me in a moment. Thank you. And some folks on our committee were especially close to Commissioner Fryer, so we hold them with extra love right now.
No, we all was close to him.
We all were.
We all had
some
a
folks knew him for
Fryer.
decades and decades, so yeah. But we all were close to him.
Man.
Yeah.
He was a good man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Welcome. We're just getting started. So we have a full but not over full agenda today. Thank you to County Attorney Michael Frew. For those who don't know him, Michael will be providing support to this committee at our meeting today and moving forward.
Yeah, we had some realignment of duties down in the legal department to try to make sure we're focusing who we're helping to try to get better points of initial contact for the department heads.
Yeah, and we're always grateful to our legal team for helping us
Thanks.
move forward with this work. Guests who are here today, we welcome you. Folks on Facebook Live, hello. If anyone wants to sign up for public comment, please go ahead and do so. There should be a sign-in sheet there, and we'll keep an eye on that as we work the shot clock of the meeting to figure out how much time to leave at the end. We'll start by reviewing minutes from our January 9th meeting, which was our community engagement meeting. If folks could take a moment to review that and let me know if there's a motion to approve or any edits.
I move to approve.
Second. All those in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Our next item is that we'll take a few minutes to just reflect on the community engagement session. Appreciation to everyone who was able to attend that. We missed those of you who were not because of scheduling conflict. A special appreciation to those who helped anchor the meeting and share stories and keep the flow of it going and help plan for it on the staff level. So just wanted to see if there's any reflections or thoughts as we look back on that.
I think I wish there had been some more people there who were not in the early childhood world. I mean, I wish it had been more of a community, parents, but at the time of day may not have been the best for parents and that sort of thing, but I had hoped there might be a little more community engagement rather than just sort of a professional level interaction.
I do like going out and seeing everything and seeing people and opening up to the public. I think it's so needed, and so it's good to be transparent like that.
I thought it was great to get out into the community, and like you said, I wish that maybe if we do it more, people will kind of go, oh, okay, they really do mean it. It was a good dialogue, for the folks that were there, but small numbers.
Any other reflections? I'll just say in closing, I want to just thank you all, because part of the work we're doing as a committee is really explicit, which is we're doing this early childhood education work, but the other part of the work we're doing as a committee is, I think, helping the county do this work in different ways, public ways, transparent ways, with a lot of community leadership, and the fact that a county committee is meeting outside of this building is a step forward. So I just want to thank folks for that. I come from a background where you do something once and a few people show up, and then you do it again and a few more show up. So I'm excited for whenever we figure out the next time to get out there.
I also think, what I liked about it was I was able to talk one-on-one with a couple that we've never got to talk because we've always been in a group, and I enjoyed that part. And I think it's good because there wasn't as many people there.
Yeah. Great, well, thank you all.
Well, and I'm sorry, go ahead. And even in our folks that we know or who are grantees or whatever, it even gave them a chance to look forward a little bit.
Yes.
What do you expect them to do about this or that or the other thing? So they can plan some.
Yeah.
Know what some of the constraints are and the realities.
Great. Well, with that, we'll close out old business, we'll move into our new business. And this, of course, is against the backdrop of the application being live and out in the world, due fairly soon, I believe. What's the official due date?
February 14th.
Due after Valentine's Day?
Yeah.
So thank you to everyone in the room who's working on applications and preparing for that. I want to take a sec just to tee up the presentation that Michael and Lamar will share with us, just to remind folks of sort of how we got to this. Part of it is the county is, with leadership of Lamar and our legal team and Stacy, is doing a lot more work just to support our committees in terms of having clear and consistent policies across committees, in terms of supporting these meetings being transparent in every way possible. And part of that also means providing support to committee members. And one of those areas is around making sure that we really have a level playing field in terms of folks having exposure to trainings around meeting procedure. For some folks in the room, they've been doing that for a long time and it feels like a second language that they speak. For other folks in the room, this may be their first time using it in a more formal way, and we want to make sure that everyone feels like that's a tool in their toolbox. So part of this is also about how we build equity into every part of this committee's work. So the goal today was really to get some direct time with Lamar and Michael, who help us on commission, make sure that we're doing our meetings the way we need to, so that we could do some training for committee members, have Q&A, and thank you all for taking the time to do this. And then also, if there are folks on committee who feel like some additional support as we move forward would be helpful, we can always do a timeout in the middle of a meeting and move through things that way. We do that sometimes in commission meetings where we're like, wait, how do we call this to question on date certain? We can do it in live real time, but we can also arrange for additional support for folks. So we want everyone in the room to feel empowered to make a motion, second a motion, add an amendment, accept an amendment, reject an amendment, table to another date, like really be able to use those tools as we move forward in this discussion. So with that context, we'll turn things over to Michael and Lamar, and thank you all.
Yep, thanks, Jasmine. I think that's the critical point. I understand from speaking with Jasmine last week, so what is the idea here today? So I understand you operated a good bit of last year without, you were just forming. You didn't have a real chair for a while. And there were a lot of questions about, what are the conflicts of interest, what are the open meeting rules, can we ever go to closed session, what are the public records laws? So I think first of all, just back up to what Jasmine mentioned, if there's ever a question, just raise your hand, how do we do this next? That's never wrong. Some people are sort of shy about asking, but don't be. Let's just get into it. So just to start off, if there's any questions in particular as we go through this, just please let me know. But we have open meetings laws and we have public records laws, and they are distinct, but they all go for the same purpose. That's to make open, transparent meetings in the process. So it starts by, everyone knows the Board of Commissioners is a public body. Also, just remember that any elected or appointed authority, board, commission, committee, council, or other body of the state or one or more counties is also a public body. So that's important when you look at, so what's an official meeting? So an official meeting is an assembly gathering at any time or place or simultaneous communication by telephone or other electronic means of a majority of the members of the public body. So down at the School of Government, and I'm going again next year for, 18th or 19th time, School of Government County Attorneys Conference. And one of the favorite things we like to talk about, just to remind everybody, and I've always gone by the premise that if it's worth saying once, it's worth repeating probably at least once a year, just to get everybody to remember. So what happens if Kit and Jasmine are texting about an item that's coming up on this agenda? And then that bounces to Robert or Al and Glenda and so on down the road. So when does that become a public meeting? That's the slippery slope. Anytime you're all communicating like that, someone can argue that you've had an illegal public meeting. So you want to be real careful about that. There's no harm in saying, hey, as as chairman, I want to add this item to next agenda. And Jasmine's always been good about the rules and knows how they work and has had experience and might think to put on the end of that, please don't respond. Let's not start talking about this by email or text, because text counts. And you're talking about, that's the public body, that's open meetings, and you gotta remember public record. So it doesn't matter what machine you're using to communicate official business, it's that you're communicating official business. It doesn't matter whether it's on your grandmother's computer down from, Hilton Head while you're on vacation. That official meeting, that official communication can be public record. I mean, the difficult part of my job is to remind people that, I'm the one that has to read it all. So it's so please make my job easy. But I have to pull out personal information or redact it. I have to pull out personnel related information or redact it. I have to get rid of stuff that's, confidential for whatever reason. And usually, media or someone requesting understands those limitations, but then they still won't change their question, and then I just have to refuse their answer, and I'm sort of getting off the edge here. But, if it's unreasonable to expect that we can comply, then, that's my answer many times. If there's like 1,000 emails responsive, you've got to narrow this down and help us out. If you just tell me what you want, I'll let you know. So that open meetings and public record.
Does it matter how many people you're communicating with?
Well, it gets to be what's the quorum.
So at one time I had heard, like, for instance, if the commissioners, if you had 3, is 3 a meeting or is 2 a meeting? I mean, if you go out for a beer, it's 2. More than 3.
Yes, so
Okay.
you're sort of getting ahead of me, because I'm looking at the bylaws for this committee and for the commissioners.
Okay, I'm sorry to do that.
Yeah, so, I mean, we'll just jump around, because that's the nature of the game. So, if we're just talking about a discrete number of 7 commissioners, and you're talking about commissioner business, then I can almost always advise that 3 of you can talk about it. Now, we know that people are gonna talk after those first 3 talk, and they're gonna talk to a 4th. Is that an illegal meeting? Well, no. 2 can talk to 2, can talk to 3, can, like that, so everyone can know what was transpired. But that is what will get you in hot water with the press or other people asking. The point is that any official action is taken at the committee or at the board level. But you don't want to have the appearance that you've already come in having made that decision. That's the problem, and that's it's hard to get around. You don't really want to get around it. You want everyone to be educated and understand what's coming before the board so you can make a reasonable decision. But you just got to remember what is public record, your texts and your emails from your public machine and your home computer, and just keep all that in mind. You can't really get in that kind of trouble on the phone unless you get everybody in on a conference call. What we do at the commission level, came up with this a few years back, was just have a reminder read, and that just in accordance with the Code of Ethics adopted by the board, all county commissioners have a duty to all applicable laws regarding official actions to uphold the integrity and independence of their board, to avoid impropriety in the exercise of duties, to faithfully perform those duties. So is there any item on the agenda, the outcome of which, and this is the key, will have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact on any board member? So this committee makes recommendations on funding. The Board of Commissioners has the final say-so. But you always want to be careful and now they've extended the law coming into effect on January 1st. You also shall not vote on any item where the person is a member, has a close familial, business, or other associational relationship. So it's extended just from the general obligation of your own to who you deal with on a business level and a family level. So that's the key for conflicts that the members of this committee need to understand. And if you have a perceived close association with a business or an entity making an application, say so. Please raise your hand and say, I've known this person for 25 years. I've known his dad. I know their cousin, that sort of thing. Just make it known. And it's really up to the committee at that point to have heard and understand what the concern, because it has to be self-reporting what that committee member is worried about. So you can say, okay, we understand, but I don't feel it's a conflict, and does anybody else? Nobody else does, and you're good to go. I mean, if you really feel strongly about that, be honest, that you can't be entirely objective, then say so, and just say, I'm not going to vote on this item, and I'm sure that the committee will respect that decision, but by the rules as they currently exist, it's up to the committee to excuse that person from voting. As an aside to that, if Kit were to get up and leave the room right before an important vote, she'd be counted as having voted for it. So just
Mike,
raise your hand and bring it up.
I'm sorry, just so I can follow along. So are you referencing then the State Government Ethics Act, which we reference in our bylaws? Is that what you're reading to us from? Or I know that doesn't include the open meetings law. I guess I'm trying to figure out, are you giving us some additional information, or are you
It's
trying
not-
to tie back to
It's not
what we
intended.
said in September, or what?
It's not intended to be additional. It's not extra. That's just a shorthand reminder. It's everyone's duty and obligation to vote. Is that what you were referencing?
Well, I was referencing everything from the open meetings law to what you were saying about conflict of interest. I see here, we've got a conflict of interest statement too.
Yep.
We don't really have anything specific about
I think-
open meetings law. I'm trying to figure out,
I think what Mike is reading from is the policies the Board of Commissioners voted on, is that correct?
trying
In
to figure out what
January?
your reference is.
That language, well, here, two things I've discovered here recently. Maybe we did things too quickly, or maybe the fact that we have many committees now that have Board of Commission members on them, that when we took the route to say, let's just give the committees the same rules as the Board of Commissioners, what I'm thinking now is really that doesn't always apply. And we need to start to tailor some of our bylaws for the committee level, whether there's commission members on them or not. But that's not intended to be extra.
That's what I think we attempted to do, but I don't think I know what the rules are you're referencing for the commissioners that we also have to,
Do you mean like the open meeting?
or whatever you just referenced, we have certain,
Well, the
rules
conflict
for
of-
the commissioners that you all should be following too.
Yeah, well.
I'm not sure we know
keep
those. Maybe that's what you're doing now.
Trying.
Okay,
I mean, in terms of voting and conflict of interest, the same rules apply whether you're a Board of Commission or a committee member. Close familiar relationship, business association, or simple potential for direct financial impact as a result of the vote.
These are
Those-
things that we need to know, and I think we need to see in writing what our constraints are. Because
Part of
what
the-
we have for conflict of interest, we did get something in here, but it's probably not to the detail that you're
Well,
speaking of.
whatever's in here isn't gonna supersede state law around open
No.
records.
And that's what I'm
Certainly true.
And
Yeah.
do we know what the state laws are?
That's what
I
he's
feel
telling
like I
you.
do, but
Yeah, we're
Well,
getting,
everybody's gonna have
Jump in,
different
Rachel?
levels of understanding.
Mike,
Yes, sir.
let me ask one question before we leave you. Back up. You mentioned about voting. Okay, say if we're voting on something in the commission meeting that I'm against, but an emergency comes up, and if I would have to leave the meeting,
You go, yes.
you said it would automatically be yes, even if I would say I'm against it and tell them to vote no for me?
No, I mean, no, we've recognized that before, if someone's had an emergency.
Okay.
Procedurally, if we had Robert's Rules of Order
Okay.
here, it would say that you need to be excused officially by the body
Okay,
before you leave.
okay, good.
But we've all run into real life, and when you have a situation where real life is happening, you're gonna recognize that.
Right, okay. I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
and Rachel,
So,
I think you had a point of clarification.
Yeah, Mr. Frew was instrumental in helping us draft these bylaws.
Right.
And the information that he's giving aligns with the bylaws. Specific to the conflict of interest piece, my recollection is that what we got from the legal department was the most narrow definition of conflict. And so it really stopped at that first part the bylaws are in everybody's packet, by the way, and the conflict of interest piece is on page 6. It initially stopped at the personal benefit from actions, and that's what he was quoting from the legal statute, the direct, readily identifiable financial benefit. This committee's desire was to have some definition around conflict that was a little bit more inclusive of potential conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest. And so that's where that additional language got included, where appearance of conflict of interest can occur. And so this group wanted to err on the side of being a little more cautious as a result of people having worked within the field of early childhood education. Naturally, that's where we gain a lot of the knowledge and experience to be effective committee members. We just want to be clear when somebody has something that might get in the way of being objective.
And the commission has a separate code of ethics, and this committee, that's the shorthand version.
And if I could
basically you're
flag-
saying if in doubt, declare it,
Yeah.
say,
Right.
I'm uncomfortable, and then we can decide as a group whether or not their discomfort is warranted.
And honestly, my advice has always been, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. Don't do it. And I'm gonna recommend,
There we go.
don't do it.
And if, just a quick sidebar, I think this is flagging though an issue for us, which is the Board of Commissions voted on a uniform set of policies for committees in January. And that included updated language around conflicts that is consistent with this in spirit, but distinct from it in letter.
Okay.
And so we might want to, for both our committee and any other committee that had COI policies predating that, we might want to go through a reconciliation process. And we would bring that before the board as just an updated amendment to our bylaws to make it absolutely consistent across the board. I think that's a little bit of what
Staff went through, and we'll go through again and see if there's anything that's inconsistent. We were looking at the attendance policy to make sure that
Yeah.
it jived, but we'll check that.
Yeah,
portion.
okay, great.
So backing up state law, Ms. Kramer is absolutely correct. I mean, whether or not it says so in these committee bylaws, we're all obligated to know the law. Wanda Green learned that when she got indicted for a law that I'm sure she hadn't read, 14-234, which is a public officer or employee who will derive a direct benefit from a contract with the public agency he or she assures, but who is not involved in making an administration of that contract shall not attempt to influence any other person who is involved. So, again, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. If you feel that you have a conflict or a perceived conflict, or you're close to those people within family or business relationship, then raise your hand. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure we avoid that or own it. And I don't know what specific questions everybody had with the bylaws of the committee. Again, these were drafted and based on the commission rules from years ago. The bylaws do say that they should be reviewed annually. I can't imagine, first off, that this board would ever really need an emergency meeting. So we were talking about how to go forward. I mean, I think everybody can afford 48 hours before you come talk about how to, vote on funding or make a strategic plan.
Can you talk us through, say we've got a scheduled meeting and we don't get to the end of our business. Do we call a special meeting, or can we continue the meeting?
Yeah, you can certainly continue it, and that what's the regular schedule? Once a month for this committee? If
Okay.
you can do two things. If you feel that you cannot wait to the next regular scheduled committee meeting, then you could, for instance, because you've run out of time or too many people are leaving, you're about to lose a quorum, you can continue the meeting to, for instance, next Tuesday at 1 o'clock, same place, same time, just to continue with the agenda. That way there's no new notice, there's nothing really new, you just come back in and pick up where you left off. Clearly, if there's matters that aren't really that pressing, say, we'll just add these on to the next meeting, see the next one.
I will just jump in and add something to what Mike said. He said you don't have to notice, but you should notice that it's been continued. You should put out a notice to that so the public will know that the meeting is a continuation. So.
And we have been doing that in practice.
Yes.
Just to make sure, okay, just send this out, put it out to all of the your usual contacts with the media, Citizen Times, WOS, et cetera, and let's post it downstairs, just to let everybody know.
Yeah.
'Cause someone may not have been here, someone may miss the notice.
This happened last year, we ran out of time and we weren't sure, did we have to wait 48 hours before we could meet again? Or could we meet again, like, could we come back in the next room?
So we could have continued, and you'd need a motion and a vote to continue,
But
right?
it's a best practice to have waited so that we could notice.
Or you could notice anyway and do it the next day.
You can.
Yeah,
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll see you here tomorrow at noon.
Yeah.
Let's just keep going,
yeah,
press
okay,
on through.
great, that's helpful.
And if people need more time, and you're not really sure, and you need to have Rachel call everybody to see when you can be available, and it ends up that no one's available till Sunday afternoon at 5, it could happen. Well, then you have a special meeting, we make sure you give 48 hours notice
Yeah, I'm not going to
beforehand.
that meeting.
A lot of us won't make that
Yeah.
deal.
So that'd be a special meeting, 48 hours notice, and then you put that out to all the normal media and post it on the door. I think that sort of gets us to where we're looking at procedural motions in the bylaws. I understand there's some questions as to how to proceed with those. So, and that's tricky, and there's no way to learn or know this stuff unless you just do it. But we have a number of listed motions here, and none of these really cover what a main motion is. So I move to approve funding for entity X. So that's a main motion. So what we have here, all the other ones are various subsidiary motions, privilege motions, and incidental motions, which can get very confusing. The important ones, I think, for a board of, a committee of this type to understand and use are motions to modify. Those are friendly amendments that you have all the time. I say, I like your idea, but how about we do it just a little bit different? So you would make a suggestion, Jasmine made the motion, so on a friendly amendment, motion to modify, you just change your motion, the same person who seconded would approve that modification. Defer consideration or continue to a time and date certain, we just talked about that. That can be any one item on the agenda, or it can be the remainder of the meeting. We're gonna continue to a time and date certain, or let's defer the consideration of this matter till the May meeting. If you wanna just push it way out there and maybe let it die. These rules do not have a table. A table is a subsidiary motion that people, parliamentary wise, like in Raleigh, you're saying, I'm gonna lie this on the table. Well, the procedural purpose of that is possibly to kill the motion, because unless someone lifts it from the table, so let's revive this and talk about it today, then by the close of that next business meeting, it's gone, unless somebody revives it. So we don't have those. We have continue to a date and time certain, and there's even an amendment motion, which I have never seen a board do, but the purpose of an amended motion could be to flip what a motion is made for. You can say against. You can't turn it into another kind of motion, but you can flip it and have the opposite effect. But I've never seen that happen, because honestly, most of these get a little bit too difficult to run with.
So can I just jump in for 1 sec? So in the flow of our meetings, typically what happens is a topic comes up, we do discussion. When it seems like someone's ready to make a motion, that formal motion is made. If someone wants to agree with it, you can then make a second. So if you get to a place where you're like, I feel like I've got enough information to suggest that we start acting, then you can make a motion. All you gotta say is, I'd like to make a motion, and I move to X. And then we get the second, and then we open formal discussion about that motion. Just whatever the language of that motion is. So just as I'm thinking about how all this maps onto what we do 90% of the time, and then we usually move towards, sometimes there's an amendment in that process, and then the motion can be revised, sort of in real time, and then we move to a vote. If there was a motion that someone really stridently disagreed with, or just thought the committee was headed in a direction that you just really didn't agree with, that's where the sort of language of to postpone to a certain time or date can get used.
That discussion sort of reminds me of two things that
Yeah.
really might show up. I mean, for instance, you might get really passionate about one particular subject that's coming up for debate. And generally, as chair, you wait for everybody to have a chance to discuss that item, at least briefly, before a vote is made. Someone might say, call a question, I've heard enough of this, but then it'd be the chair's job to say, wait, I don't believe I've heard from everybody yet. So that might get a little technical, but not much deeper than that, I wouldn't suspect.
And our hope really is that when that discussion opens, we do hear from everyone, even if it's just someone saying, I agree, I disagree, but that's a great opportunity for sort of every voice in the room to chime in on the debate, and ideally, that's the threshold we're looking for before we move to a vote.
So as a technical matter, if somebody makes a motion and you want to change it, but you like the general direction things are going, it's a motion to modify, not a motion to amend.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That was kind of my question, and who does that? So say I make a motion, and then, during the discussion, I really like what Leslie says, and I was like, oh, yeah, let's change it to that. Does she change it, or do I, or does it matter?
You could say, I'd like to amend my motion to reflect this, and then it would have to get a second. Or Leslie could say, I'd like to offer an amendment to the motion, you'd have to agree to it.
Okay. But you
Yes,
said
as
it's not
a friendly amendment. So as a motion to amend, and this is where it can get really tricky real quick. If you're doing a motion to amend, then it could be any member, not just the one who made it. Because you're really not asking the person who made the motion to amend, but you're asking
If
to
it's
amend
friendly.
and flip it.
We're friendly.
Yeah.
But if I do it, it's just a revision? If I made it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, because once you make a motion and there's been a second and the chair announces it, there might be more discussion, but at that point, the committee as a whole owns the motion. It's not yours anymore, whoever made the motion, it's the body's. So it can be discussed, it can be changed, it can be amended, it can be flipped. But no, you guys.
If I can ask, my question is much more concrete, and it is how to offer comment. So I know that some of us dive in, some of us politely raise a hand, and I wonder, are there guidelines regarding that? Does that go back to Robert's rules, or do we just, is it free for all?
I think two things. I mean, that's really the chair's job to make sure the discussion gets shared around the table. And it could be your job, if you didn't feel you had your opportunity to speak, you can raise your hand and say, point of order, prior to vote, I'd like to say my piece, something like that. Because everyone has the right to put in their 2 cents before the vote.
Yeah, and I think that's something we are figuring out. Every committee has a different personality. I think there's some of us who jump right in, others who sort of stay on the boundary line a little bit. My invitation to everyone is to jump in, and if you also jump in all the time, maybe to take a step back so that other folks have a little more room to do that. And I wanted to wait till we had this opportunity together before I started sort of using a little bit more of these tools. So I'll be using a little bit more of these tools just to make sure that we really do hear from as many voices and that there's balance in terms of getting around the room as we move forward.
Thank you.
No, that's a great question. And if raising your hand feels good to you, go for it. If jumping in feels good to you, go for it. We can work together to make sure that we're getting that balance of voices.
Right, and also with just the 7 commissioners up there with Chairman Newman, we've got a light, and usually with that light, and he knows, okay, we got someone else that wants to speak, so.
Yeah, when you put your light on, it means I'm ready to go. Yeah. The one thing just to flag, and for folks following along, we're on page 4 to 5 to 6 of our bylaws, which really outline everything Free's walking us through. But if you look, this is a minor point, but it might come up as we're heading into this season of deliberation. If you look under sort of item 1D, a substantive motion is out of order. This is page 5, top of page 5, 1D, about a substantive motion is out of order while another substantive motion is pending. That's something that may come up where, let's say a motion's been made that this came up last year, that we create a bucket of funds designated for startups. And we were having debate about that discussion. A friendly amendment to that might be, we create that bucket and we cap it at $30,000. A substantive motion that would be out of order would be saying, I make a motion that we create a bucket for programs serving more than 300 kids. And that would be steering us into a whole nother topic. And that last year, again, that probably happened a few times organically, and this year we'll be really working to stay with the question at the table and get to some resolution through vote or continued discussion on that before we move on to an idea that really shifts us into a different lane of discussion.
So it's out of order as long as that other motion is pending, but once the motion's voted on?
Correct. Once
Okay.
we come to some resolution on that initial motion.
Gotcha.
Is that
That's
accurate?
exactly right.
Okay.
I mean, that's where I should have started. I mean, but the incidental stuff, the subsidiary motions, the privilege motions really take second fiddle to a main motion. But only one main motion at a time is allowed to be discussed and considered. So that second motion in Jasmine's example is out of order and wouldn't be brought up until this pending main motion is disposed of. And then along that line, if you're going to have a number of considerations and debates and discussions while people are probably quite possibly in the room who made an application or they're seeking some course, some decision favorable to their ideas from this board. So again, once the chair closes public comment or any discussion from the public or a presentation, then that discussion belongs to the board, and that's where you just have to put on your blinders and do what you volunteered to do with this committee and follow your duty to vote, unless you need to raise your hand and say, I need to step out of this one. And that's something that I've always seen. It's natural to feel sort of funny about that, or not inclined to discuss it in front of people that are asking for something or some particular funding, but you gotta do it.
But isn't that something else that we were a little unsure of? We have public comment at the end of our agendas. The example Mike just gave included public comment in the middle of the agenda while topics are being discussed. What you just used as an example.
I mean, that depends
Yeah,
on
we
the meeting's
can,
being
but
run.
we have and we haven't, we're unsure, and,
Well-
do we let people raise their hand from the audience and say, I wanna comment on that, whether they have a proposal pending or not? Or,
I think under the bylaws we adopted this summer and the guidelines that we are moving forward with, people would not be able to do that. The one thing the board could entertain is, if we wanted to, is something that we do at the Board of Commission, is that there can be public items before votes take place on certain issues. And at the board, it requires a certain number of commissioners, depending on whether it's new or old business, to request public comment on that voting item. It's not legally required that we do so, except around certain things like zoning issues. But this board could, if we wanted to wade into that territory, we could consider adding that as an option. Currently, public comment is only at the end of meetings.
which we've had some reaction from the public saying, this just doesn't seem to make sense. I'm only able to comment after you all have already made decisions, which I agree with. That does seem, from a civic engagement and citizen engagement and, a full disclosure and transparency perspective, that does seem backwards.
And this is kind of a classic debate. We've had it many times at the Board of Commission level. I'm always on the losing end of those votes, for what it's worth. Where I am, but if members of this committee decided this was a topic you wanted to bring up, you would put it on the agenda for discussion, and there could be a motion made to move public comment to the beginning of the meeting. So that's now the.
You're saying if the committee members.
If the committee members wanted to add this as an agenda item, we'd go through the process through which we request agenda items, which is letting the executive committee know that, and it gets added currently. And then it would come to discussion. And if we got to a place where someone wanted to make a motion to move public comment or and otherwise change it, the committee would vote on that. So that's the tool we have available to move, if there was the will of the board to move that.
But then it seems very likely or very possible that the time we have for committee business gets limited by the insertion of public comment in the middle that can.
That's the counter argument, yes.
Yeah.
You two have just illustrated the pro and con of this debate, yeah.
That's a problem.
So
I mean, it's not a
everyone-
problem, it's civic discourse. This is just what it is.
Well, and this committee can, at a later date, put this on an agenda and discuss and change it if there's the majority desire to, for sure.
And everyone that, I mean, I know it says the public comment period limited to 3 minutes for any individual. So every single person that signs up gets 3 minutes,
Up
no
to
matter
that.
how long that takes.
Mm-hmm.
So if we put it at the beginning, it could be the whole meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
So, my question is, let's say we're having this discussion, somebody's made a motion and either seconded or we're having the discussion before the motion or whatever, but we know that there's somebody in the audience that has expertise in a particular issue. Is it permissible to call on somebody to say, can you help us with that because they've got a particular substantive area of knowledge? Or is that opening up public comment? Because
Well, that would not be public comment.
but is it appropriate to do?
It certainly could be. I mean, that'd be a consensus or will of the board. I've seen it done many different ways. The chair could say, I suggest we just hear this expertise on this subject, limited to that subject, not weighing in on what they think should pass or not, hopefully.
Okay.
Sometimes the committee will vote on it up or down, majority wins. But yes, it's proper, it's not inappropriate, it's not public comment.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, but regardless of how you get to that point, once the discussion of a topic is closed from the public's perspective and you're considering and deliberating, that's when your deliberations have to be done in public. Someone couldn't make a motion to go into closed session because there'd be no real reason to go into closed session unless you want a quick advice, from the attorney, can we talk about this in closed session? Well, I can tell you here on the hall, no, you can't. So that's the short. I mean, I can't imagine what this committee would have before that would require a closed session.
That's a good point.
Unless we were buying a piece of property to build a daycare center on it that was gonna be funded, and we didn't want the price escalated on the piece of property.
Well, that's a whole different.
All right, never mind.
The problem is the closed session statutes authorize discussion of purchasing properties, but there's only so much you can hide from the public from such a meeting. The terms, yes, where it is, what it is, no, so you sort of let the skin out of the bag anyway.
We have about 5 more minutes probably for this portion of the meeting, so.
Well, a real quick question to come back to Leslie's point, because it's written into our bylaws that the public comment is at the end of every meeting, we would have to make a bylaws change if we wanted to change that. Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
And I do see a number of things in here. There's a few typos. There are a few things like the emergency meeting. We need to keep that in there. There's a few of the suggestions I would make. I'd probably pull a number of the motions that are in there, subsidiary and incidental. I mean, this committee doesn't really need all that. So it is say that they'd be reviewed annually.
Mhm.
And this board can bring them up about any agenda. And if you did it not too many months ago, you might want to just go through this time and see how it works.
Yeah.
Unless you want to have that one discussion on moving that one item up to the front, so. Amending the bylaws is always fair game, because the bylaws are the committees.
I don't wanna beat a dead horse, but I'm gonna beat it anyway. In terms of, we could, it's my understanding at least, that we could say, if there are items that were going to be addressed at this meeting, for example, you could have a public input portion, you could time restrict it. You don't have to, you could say, we have got 20 minutes to devote to any public comment that directly relates to today's agenda. You could structure it that way and then put a time limit on it, so it's not, if 50 people showed up and each wanted their 3 minutes, it wouldn't work that way because you'd have a time certain. You could do it that way. I don't know if we should, but just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, I think that leads to two things. I mean, in terms of public comment, this committee is not required to have public comment. You've determined to do so, that's fine. It says that, public comment period be limited to 3 minutes for any individual representative. That doesn't mean that the chair or the body couldn't say, we want to impose additional reasonable restrictions. Because any public body that's required to have public comment can say, okay, we'll give this side 20 minutes and this side 20 minutes.
And that's it.
And that's it. Because that'd be reasonable. Some people might think not, because there's 110 people over here that can take all night, and there's only 3 over here. But it'd be reasonable to balance the time for yays or nays. Anything that, as long as you're structuring it that you're not limiting someone's speech and content of their speech, you can make reasonable limitations. Because the meetings before this board, we're not in the park. It's a limited public forum, and you can make reasonable restrictions, time and place.
Can we make those like within the same meeting where we implement that, or does it have to be made in advance and then put out there?
Probably made in advance for that.
Yeah, you can do it, but you have to try to be consistent. I mean, that's the difficulty. I think if it's not done in advance, I think you could do it. If all of a sudden there's 100 people here wanting to speak and had signed up, well, you're going to have to govern that somehow. But I think the good starting point is always just to have that limit. It could be 2 minutes, it could be 5 minutes. You just need some structure and do your best to remain consistent. And then that's the challenge.
Jen, I think where this gets difficult is when we have proposals pending and people want to lobby us about their proposal, or they want to add some information they think is really important, but they're advancing the benefits of the board funding what they are proposing. That's where I think it gets tough. And we have a lot of people showing up and so forth.
But you bring up a good point, because we had something happen last time, and I think we need to think about this going into this cycle, and we shouldn't allow this to happen. When we give people the time with their proposals to give them to us, let us review them, then we go back to them for questions. I don't think it's right when you let 1 or 2, when we're deliberating and making the decision, come in and lobby us while we're making the decision. We should keep the playing field level and give all of them the same opportunity to give us the information. But after that point, when we're deliberating, I don't think they should, because it's not fair. And it's not fair to, if you're not going to have everybody in, you can't do it that way. And we did the last time, and I realize we're getting started. But going forward, we cannot do that. That's not the way to do it.
And that's why this effort we're undertaking right now is so important. We have the structure.
Right.
We have the chairman, we have the executive council here to maintain the structure that we were kind of lacking last time,
That's a good
So
question.
do we have
During public comment, or maybe Rachel and Fru, you guys could tag team on this. During public comment, someone could speak about their application, yes or no?
I think so.
Yeah, because they have that freedom to do so.
At the end of the meeting?
At the end of the meeting.
Yeah, but that's if we made the decision.
Right.
Yeah.
But after the vote,
Yeah.
That's what we say here now, I think. If we decide to change it, which we're sort of wondering about, I just think we need to realize what that floodgates that could open.
that opens the
Pandora's box.
Separate from any agenda items committee members may want to propose, it's been really helpful for staff to have the roadmap that this committee made for FY20. Our next few months, we're going to talk in a little bit about how our agendas will be busy with grant making business, but I think that what it makes sense for us to do is put bylaws on maybe the July or August agenda once we're on the other side of funding decisions, and so staff will put it there as a placeholder for now, so that it comes back up for any revisions that legal would like to suggest or that come from committee.
So we would operate under these and not make any adjustments like public comment on their proposals in the middle of the meeting, like what Al was saying, right?
So
So how will we handle when we get to the deliberation point of saying, well, last time we kind of went, well, let's give this one here this, and this one here this, and this one here this, and we had all those different numbers running at the time and had all that coming up and down on those things, and you know, like Kit would give a suggestion and everybody would give suggestions, and we had like all those suggestions up there, and then so like we would vote on package A or package B or package, I mean, you know, how does that all work? Is that under the funding motion that would be out on the floor, or how does that discussion, I guess, get up there?
One path that might be a simple path would be we will have done scoring, discussion, probably some deliberation, and at some point someone say, I make a motion that we move into the funding allocation process, and I move that we move forward with package A. And there would be discussion, opportunity for amendments to that vote, and we'd proceed from there. That would be one path through it. Last year, we didn't have some of that formality and process, but this year we'll make sure we really take our time with it. We'll be really deliberate. We'll make sure everyone's really oriented to where we are in terms of what motion's on the floor, has it had a second, are we in formal discussion, is everyone weighing in? I think this will give us some great, really helpful kind of constraints as we move forward in the process this year. Does that speak to your question? Are there any, we have a few other agenda items today and a few folks who have signed up for public comment. Are there any other questions or anything else, Lamar or Free, that you all would like to add?
I would just add, logistically, just make sure you notice meetings, you notice cancellations of meetings, modifications of meetings. So those things sometimes get lost in translation as far as cancellations and especially modifications. If you don't know ahead of time that you're moving from downstairs to upstairs, if you get here and you have to do that, make sure you put something on the door so you can let the public know where the meeting is moving to. Just kind of be aware of that. Make sure that you're transparent to the public and anybody that wants to attend the meeting. That's biggest thing. And myself and Stacy in the clerk's office, we are here to help and make sure that we know what your roster is. If members change, somebody leaves, somebody comes, however that decision is made, let us know so we can put it on the agenda for the Board of Commissioners and just keep us updated. And if we need to move anything as far as any conversation that we need to move to legal, we will do that. I will reiterate and really stress that you use legal for anything that you have concerns about, because you don't want, it's easier to go ahead and wrangle it out at the beginning than go too far down the rabbit hole and you can't get back out.
Good advice.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Thank you.
And I welcome if y'all need whatever expertise, but legal is probably the biggest part of this. I'm more logistics speaking, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Michael, very much. Thank you, Stacy.
Anytime.
Yeah, we have a wonderful team supporting this. Thank you all, and to be continued. And as we're moving through meetings, we'll do this at Board of Commissioners sometimes. Someone will say, I want to do X. Michael, can you help me formulate the appropriate way to do that? So we can do that too. It doesn't, as we all get more comfortable with it, with the tools here. Great, thank you all. And Rachel, I think you have the next two items. Thank you. Oh,
When the committee established our plan for this fiscal year, or our roadmap, we put in the month of February, which felt like way off in the future, that we would be looking at models for success from other communities across North Carolina, how they're doing early childhood work, specifically when there's a county government actor, but also just county as in locality, what's happening across the state. As we got closer to this date, we realized that as we look at this, it's going to be one item in an agenda that we have a lot of other items. So in consulting with the executive committee, our chair and vice chair and secretary, Jasmine and Glenda and Philip, we decided that staff would do some research and compile and present some information, as opposed to other ideas we had been batting around, like what if we bring in, you know, the representative from Mecklenburg County or another county to share with us about our work. We have opportunity to flag things that we want to hear more about or do more research on, and please share that with us so that we can follow up appropriately. This will be sort of a high-level, fast-forward version of the information. This went out in the packet and is posted online, so you may have had a chance to look through it ahead of time. There are 6 counties that we're looking at as part of the sort of bright spots for early learning in North Carolina. Later in the presentation, I'll give a reference to, and I do want to give credit to the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation, who works with communities all across the state and with our local early childhood providers that collaborate together and have compiled some of this information that is available for us to borrow from. So Durham is one that we look to, and they, in Durham County, are focusing on pre-K, Durham pre-K. The goal is to expand access to high-quality preschool services, and they're using a phased approach. The county investment has grown pretty significantly over the few years that they've been making these investments, and they are very specifically funding classrooms, preschool or pre-K classrooms, starting with 4-year-olds, moving to 3-year-olds, starting with children from families that have financial need, and then expanding with a universal pre-K sort of model in mind when fully built out. So the total county investment at this time is over $5 million. And they use a partner organization, sort of the model and the structure there of the Child Care Association.
Is that $5 million per year?
Annual.
And is that new money, or is this investment they've been making for years and years and years in early childhood?
I'll make a note of that question and I can follow up. I was digging around in people's budget books, which is what counties publish online when they adopt a budget, and kind of some of them would have that historical view, and some of them wrote about it maybe in their materials, and I don't remember off the top of my head the year-over-year growth, but Durham is one that has, it seems like that they've been maintaining and then each year expanding their investment. Do you have any recollection of that, Jasmine? I know Durham is one that you had wanted.
Not historically. I think it was like 2.6 or 3 a year or so ago, so it's jumped up.
Well, and then whether, I think historically is important in our example. If we're comparing
I don't have
ourselves,
that data about
you know,
Durham,
whether,
yeah.
like us, now we have to include funding that historically has been there for young children.
Correct. Foresight. Building the foundation, the pre-K priority began again as a universal pre-K focus, as many of these other communities have. So really trying to focus on early learning from that preschool aspect, and they've got an outside organization, so the county is not the lead entity on this partnership. It's called Family Services. They too studied and published findings similar to Buncombe County about the state of early learning and preschool access, and I didn't see a county investment from Forsyth County government. I didn't see a heavy participation or role from county government, and so that's an area that we are different from them.
And they're different from us because they've had a heavy investment by foundations, I think.
Guilford County has an initiative, speaking of investments, called Get Ready Guilford, and Duke Endowment is an investor, as well as a funding organization or a funding stream called Ready for School, Ready for Life. It is more than only early childhood education. It is about early childhood, and not even just the pre-K years. It actually goes up to age 8. So think remember we looked at North Carolina's Early Childhood Action Plan and how it had the domains of healthcare and safety and education and learning, and it was through this sort of age 8 or 3rd grade. That's more of the approach that Get Ready Guilford seems to be taking, and that one of their main goals is to take systems of care and providers and resources that are separate from one another, that are disjointed, and create more seamless systems. They've had significant amounts of investments. This is a $32 million investment that's noted here from Blue Meridian Partners. I think that's the group associated with Ready for School, Ready for Life.
Blue Meridian is a group of foundations that includes the Duke Endowment, but it includes also, I think, the Kaufman Foundation.
Okay.
Marion Ewington, I forget, there's a New York foundation involved. So it's about 4 or 5 of them, and they've put together a lot of money. And then those organizations, then they're making an investment. So, and I don't think that Blue Meridian funding is going to be available for any other community in North Carolina until their Guilford experiment is wrapped up, which is probably 10 years.
Thank you.
8 more years, maybe.
When we were making the list of the people that could be at the table, we wanted to make sure there was always a funder at the table, and that's the kind of information that's really helpful.
Yeah.
And we've talked before about this work becoming an attractor, and as we get 1 year and 2 years and 3 years into the work, we don't want to see only the existing kinds of funding sources that are either traditional and already in the game, funding early childhood, or the county, which is one of the newer ones, but really seeing the business or the philanthropy or other some creative investments that are coming together. So,
Have there been any conversations with Dogwood about, I mean, they've got that leverage fund, which is about providing assistance in identifying, I mean, it stinks to find that the Blue Meridian Partners Group has already made that commitment, because we need one of those, but we don't want to be reading about one of our neighbors doing it. Have we had any conversation with Dogwood about that yet?
Not in any formal way. The committee could certainly, on behalf of the committee, do a kind of a reach out.
I mean, it might be worth considering helping identify sources of funding if we want to do something super creative and especially when you're talking about, this sounds like the whole child, you know, not just, it's dealing with everything from food and housing and healthcare and all those things, and it's dealing with a wider range, and I think that's really smart.
Our Health and Human Services Director nudges me at least once a month saying, are we going to do an early childhood action plan for Buncombe? When are we going to take beyond just early childhood education and look at all the other early childhood pieces? So I'm sure there will be appetite.
Just informally, is that something we'd like to ask staff to do, is a reach out to Dogwood to see if this committee can?
Maybe beyond staff, or
Yeah.
leaders
You know
with
what?
staff.
Well, why don't we do it this way? I met with Anthony a few weeks ago for about 2 hours. Well, he reached out to me. It was a lot of things. He told me if you need any help, why don't I schedule a meeting with him, with the 2 of us?
Robert?
And Robert, yeah, with 3 of
Great.
us from the county, from the commission, and go from there, and then we'll see.
Does that make it a public meeting?
Huh?
There's 3.
So go, just have
Yeah.
No, three's.
3?
Three is
It's not
okay.
4
3
of
is
us.
okay?
Three's okay.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
I'll get with him.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think it would be important for them to know what we are doing and what the goals are, because I think there's gonna be some shared goals, and, you know, you don't want people kind of.
Especially
Yeah.
through
Doing
8,
it not-
I mean, through
yeah.
age 8, you
Yeah.
know, wholeness.
Well, and to further complicate matters too, the Asheville City Schools Equity Committee is working on, they've developed a youth action plan, and it might be nice to find ways to look for collaborations, because there are too many needs for it to be fractured, so.
And we know that many of our partner organizations are also in communication with Dogwood Health Trust and other foundations in the region. And so keeping in mind what we as when and how we as a county entity can create more opportunity or more leverage or use our infrastructure or something to create pathways that might not be there otherwise.
It'd be nice to have somebody, a grant writer who's thinking ahead about types of funding and has knowledge base that we could go after.
I also think in the world, at least in health, you know, we're really recognizing that to achieve good health for children, you have to look at in all these other areas. And so in education, I think is recognizing that. So it's the perfect timing for everything to come together. And when you look at, even though it's delayed, Medicaid transformation and the healthy opportunities, you know, work that's out there, and that seems to be moving ahead, even though the Medicaid transformation's on hold a bit right now. That all of it's a perfect timing to kind of make what we're doing and focusing on known, so that we can reach out to other partners and amplify the work.
That's great. It makes sense as we listen to the conversations that happened at site visits. Many of them were about curricula and educational related things, and many of them were about other factors.
Feeding the kids, yeah.
Mental health.
Yeah.
Mecklenburg County, so in Charlotte, they've got Mech Pre-K. It's a very specific preschool model, so not a type of grant that is different from Buncombe County's. They started with the goal to clear the child care subsidy waitlist, but also have the understanding that working on workforce development, evaluation, and all of these other pieces fit together. Their county funding, to answer that kind of year-over-year question, Leslie, it looks like each year has been growing significantly, and they have a projection of, in future budget cycles, how much they intend to continue investing, given available funding and political will, of course, up to $60 million by 2024. Their population is over 1 million, so there's some scale. It would be interesting to look at some of these things right-sized for or factored for the size of the community, which is listed up in the top corner of each slide, by the way.
And we are actually, we don't have childhood population data, but per capita population to amount, we're right on par with them. Our 3.6 to our 260,000 is roughly the same ratio as 15 million to 1.1 million.
But in 2020, they're putting 15.6. So is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. At current levels, they have the plan to get to 60 million, so to quadruple that. But just as a point of reference for right now, we're at the same relative level.
That's more than a 2% annual increase in there.
Yes.
They, as county government, are also situated differently in that Mecklenburg County operates Smart Start, which in Buncombe County is operated by a nonprofit organization, Buncombe Partnership for Children. And so in every community, you've got these different funding sources and these different players and these different factors that cause the local model to look different. Here's one of our neighbors, Get Set Transylvania. It's a childhood initiative that is more kind of whole child. And you may remember or have seen they are associated with Sesame Street in communities, so they've garnered an affiliation that brings in some resources and support and technical assistance that are really cool in the sort of the community engagement, public connection around supporting young children. They're working on trying to increase access as well as quality and affordability. These are goals that we see from community to community. And Wake County, I'm going a little quicker because I know we have another conversation on our agenda about dates, but Wake County has Wake Pre-K, and they are focusing on NC Pre-K, the North Carolina Pre-K program, trying to use local resources to, through the mechanism of NC Pre-K, expand that access. So not coming up with different criteria or different kinds of services, but really trying to grow that. And they've got about $1.7 million of county investment that I was able to identify for this current fiscal year. And just wanted people to be aware of the group that a lot of this information came from, the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation. In addition to tracking local funding for early learning, they've got other campaigns, including Family Forward NC, which is why I'm locking eyes with Kit across the table. You had offered a couple months back, they would love to have an opportunity to meet with our group in the future and share about some of these other campaigns if we're interested and have that time available. Are there any questions about the material in that presentation?
Interesting to see all the concerted effort out there and see how we fit in.
People are looking at us too. It's, and that's a nice thing to note, that people are looking at what we're doing here. So thanks again, commissioners, for making that investment.
Here. Well, and I think, this is relatively new. It's great to see what folks have done, but really in terms of time, these investments by county governments are new. I mean, when the legislature situation came up and funding was not expanding, then this was a strategy that a lot of advocates turned to, and certainly the foundation was leading the way there, but this is a new development to have all this support.
And just to connect some dots on that, so we're one of 4 counties that are allocating as a budget line funding towards this. And when we've had some of those discussions about what do the statutes say, how can we allocate capital, there's not a court ruling on this question. That's what we're referring to, is that there's these 4 counties that are kind of, clearly operating under statutory guidance to do this, but also we're learning as we go some of those specific ways to do that. So just to connect. Pioneers, yeah. So to connect the dots on some of the conversations we have across meetings, that's specifically what we're referencing. Thank you, Rachel. You have the next agenda item, and then I think we have about 10 minutes before we head to public comment.
Great. I'm happy to lead us through this. This is on behalf of the executive committee. So got together with Philip and Glenda and Jasmine and tried to sort of map out our coming months, knowing that was the part of the roadmap that was like the funding part. So we had to put some details around it and brainstormed how it could potentially look. And so are pitching this option for the committee's consideration. We know that applications are due February 14th. We plan to come into the office that following Monday morning and in relatively short order be able to turn those back around to the committee. So one nice thing is that everyone who's on the committee used the software last year, and so there will be some reorienting to it. And Angeline, who is on jury duty today and couldn't be here, she got seated for a federal grand jury. So
She may not be here for a while.
She said just this week, we'll see. Anyway, she will prepare. She's got those kind of screenshots that show how to navigate in the software. That will come to you with a reminder about how to log in. You've seen the score sheet. It's also in our meeting material packet from last month, so it's online. It'll be built into the software. You would be receiving an email on the 17th, ideally, unless we have some organizing of the information that we have to do, so that committee members now have that in your hand and can begin your work of scoring.
Our county office is not closed on the 17th.
I don't know what's
because of President's Day.
I don't think so.
I've got Super Tuesday being on, it says regional holiday. It is not a holiday at the chamber, but it says that March 3rd is Super Tuesday regional holiday.
Is that when there's a lot of voting?
I would assume.
Yes, that is the vote.
It's not a
primary.
But
It's not a holiday.
It's not a holiday, is it?
We have primaries going on in Buncombe County.
Outlook
and
has populated it as a holiday.
That would be our regular meeting. However, that's only 2 weeks after the group will have had the applications, and we don't know what the volume is going to be, but there could be a lot to work through. And we're not sure if it's reasonable to meet 2 weeks after you get the applications. So there's a proposal to move that meeting to the March 17th, which would give the committee a full month to review. During that meeting, we could discuss.
Green beer.
That's right.
You want to decide if
That's
it's
St.
continue?
Patrick's Day.
Right,
Green
thank
beer.
you.
Yeah,
Green
green
beer.
beer. Green money, green
Okay.
clothes.
Yeah.
Got it. So let me continue covering what's in here, and then we can talk about any decisions. If we did that, we would be able to discuss the applications, look at the initial scores even, but focus that discussion on what questions does each committee member, or does the committee member as a whole want to send to the applicants. The questions would then go to the applicants the next day and give them a couple weeks to prepare their responses, which then could be compiled and sent back out to members of the committee. You would have 2 weeks before your next regular meeting, which is April 7th, which means you could take the answers to the questions and adjust your scores accordingly. As you gained more information, maybe you didn't feel like you could score a section, or you scored it higher or lower than you wanted to after you learned the extra information from the questions. We would come back on April 7th. You'll see there's a bullet there that says a recommendation for no in-person presentations, and there were 2 pieces of rationale for this recommendation. One is that how on earth will we schedule and manage that logistically within this time frame? But then the second piece that we discussed in that smaller group was the sort of aspects of what it will substantively add to our process, and can we have the process that we want without those presentations? And Jasmine and Philip and Glenda were feeling like bringing forward a recommendation that didn't have in-person presentations from the committee was where we wanted to land. And we can discuss that in a minute. Let me just cover the rest. So if we did that, we would have our meeting on the 7th. We know from last year, coming in one meeting and finalizing the funding allocations isn't realistic, so let's go ahead and schedule another meeting in April. Sticking with those Tuesdays, that would be April 21st, to finalize the recommendations. We now know what to do if we find ourselves at the end of the meeting on the 21st and aren't done with our work. Somebody can propose a motion to continue the meeting to a date certain. But it would probably need to be the 22nd or the 23rd or the 24th, because they're due from us to the budget office on the 24th. So there are 2 things that are in here that are a little bit of a deviation from what you might have been expecting. One is a moved meeting for March, and one is a removal of the having in-person presentations from applicants as part of the process. So back to you, Chair.
So let's discuss, and when we get to a place where someone's ready to make a motion, we do a motion about how we proceed. Thanks, Christine.
So the ingathering of questions, is that going to be while we're doing our scoring and we're going to input it into the program, or we're sending these by email to somebody, or how are we going to have our questions?
The first method will be we'll be writing them into the software. That way you can keep track of it as it comes up, and it's an easy way to communicate it. The second method would be in that meeting we can come up with other things. Maybe discussion helps us think of some things that we'd like, and we can write them down. I certainly wouldn't reject if someone sent an email and said, oh, I thought of another question.
So we'll have several input points. I think doing it in the software helps so much while you're thinking about it. So
But the ones that we put in the software, the folks would get, or you would make sure that they got them?
We're going to make sure that you have clear directions on where to write a question.
Yeah, that was confusing.
Like a question for the applicant.
Gotcha. Okay.
You'll have to go through and crawl in through there and get them all out and send them to them.
Yeah. We'll ask for Angeline support on that. I wish I could tell you like where exactly, but I know there's a way.
It doesn't matter. It's not like it was last year.
Any further discussion? Does it mess anybody up that April the 7th is a Buncombe County, it's spring break? It doesn't mess me up, I'm just saying.
My cats don't go to school, so I'm okay.
I know.
I've been there and done that.
It's not a holiday for me at work.
What about the rescheduled March meeting? Any questions or concerns about the 17th of March?
I won't be here, but it doesn't matter. I think we still need the month instead of 2 weeks. And so
Yeah.
I'll just make sure I finish scoring and everything, and if I need to, specific questions or whatever, I'll just type them in the system, but I think that's a good move.
And you and I could meet ahead of time and talk through them too if you want.
Sure.
I will also not be here that date, so I might need to join your meeting.
Another
Do you need a
date?
motion to change that date?
Well, let's see,
How many people can make it?
is
I
that,
don't have
yeah,
my
we can,
calendar.
It's no problem.
that's not yours, but.
Yeah, I know.
Is there a day that week that,
I'm gone that
No,
entire.
you're
I'm
gone,
that
you're
week.
both gone that entire
Yeah.
week, okay.
We
I don't know
usually
if
try to
I'm
pick the
going.
commissioners Tuesdays.
Yeah.
It has become predictable for the committee, but also
Yeah.
it works for our 3 members on the
Yeah.
board.
Are you all comfortable with the process of getting your scores and feedback in? Okay.
I'll reach out to you and figure out how to communicate with you.
Can I make a motion that we move the date from March 3rd to March 17th, and that we have no in-person presentations?
Second.
Yeah.
One motion to do both those things.
We have a motion and a second on the table. I would make a request to consider a friendly, I guess those are you, well, to consider adding the potential that we'd schedule the additional meeting on the 21st
Yes.
as a third prong of that.
Right.
You could just adopt this whole
Or
thing.
just that we adopt this whole grant review and meeting schedule as presented.
That's lovely.
Okay. So we have an amended a motion, okay, we have an amended a motion that we adopt this whole meeting schedule. We have a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, ready for a vote? Then we're voting on whether to adopt this as written. Any discussion you'd like to participate in?
No, I liked it.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, we've adopted this plan. Prue, you had a thumb? Okay, great job, y'all. That concludes, our agenda, our new business. A reminder, just to review this one more time, applications will be due the 14th. Our next meeting will take place March 17th. Staff will be following up between then on February 17th to get us materials and instructions. If you need any support along the way, reach out to staff or the executive committee. Great, we will now open the floor for public comment. Ms. Betty Council is the first person who signed up. Ms. Council, you have up to 3 minutes. If you'd like to speak from there, you can. If you'd like to be here. Okay.
Thank you. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question. First thing I want to know is, are there any community members on this commission? There are. Yes. And then the other thing I want to mention is, I'd like to suggest that there be an revision to the bylaws to include public comment, under the discretion of the commission. So sometimes you can probably see that there could be a public comment, needed or, invited. And if it's in the bylaws, then, that could happen easily. So, I've been sitting here, they say breathe when you're stressed, and I've been breathing and having help. I want to push back on the idea of having preschool for children. If I were able, I would go to the state and do that. One of the reasons, I know it's trying to stop a slow, stop or slow down a fast-moving train, but, even though there are other models, Asheville is unique in a bad way. Asheville has a history of not doing well for Black students. And, they're struggling and they've been traumatized in the school system. And my pushback is that if or when there are preschools for kids 3 to 4, that would be an earlier pathway for them to pipeline to prison. And that is such a stressful part for me. Asheville City schools are worse in the state in a lot of areas, and the nation in several areas. And to put 3 and 4-year-olds in that system, in a school system, earlier, when they could be playing and having fun, it's increasing their pathway to prison. And that's my challenge. I am really stressed about it, and the thought of having my grandkids or any child being in a system that is not prepared. We can't compare Asheville to the models that you we're at the bottom in every area. So how can we talk about putting our kids in preschool and starting them on that pathway sooner than they would when they start kindergarten? I'm a teacher. I taught 30 years in Buncombe County Elementary School. And thinking about that breaks my heart. With the discipline that's happening in actual city schools, and the fact that some of the students, even kindergartens, have been taken to jail, to prison, to the court system early. And we're talking about 3 and 4-year-olds that happening to them. That's unacceptable. I know the state is pushing for this, but I'm not speaking for the black community. This is Betty Council speaking. This is my perspective. And I am just heartbroken every time I see this idea come up. I would not have been here had I not just so happened to see that this was going to be the meeting today. But I choose not to have, I choose for the kids not even to be able to read, than for them to be headed to prison. We can teach them reading later, but not sooner to prison. Please. Allow them to have the extra playing time and home time, fun time. I know parents sometimes need a place for the kids to go, open daycares, and then have the teachers in those places trained in racial equity, know about cultural competency skills and how to work with children of color, and provide scholarships for African Americans who want to go into child care to do that, and then put them into those slots. But stop sending our kids to prison earlier. That's not okay. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Council. We also had Ms. Amy Berry sign up. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thanks. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that Rachel shared in her presentation. And one is to be sure that folks are aware on this committee that Asheville Buncombe Preschool Planning Collaborative and Buncombe Partnership for Children has been a part of a group for the last 3 years that included most of the counties highlighted. And it was a group that came together in order to look at funding opportunities at the business community level, county, and state and federal. And so one of the things that we did look at is what are different strategies for increasing investments in early care and education, and what cities and counties across the country have been most effective in doing that. So we're continuing to participate in that. Part of that discussion resulted in 2 of those counties getting county funding. So it's been a really exciting group to be a part of. And the other thing is that, let's see, 3 of the counties highlighted in that presentation, their expansion and their investment of funds is specific to 4-year-olds. It is expanding, it's taking the NC pre-K model, recognizing that there's not enough state money, and expanding the NC pre-K model only. And while that's, works for them, great for them, I just want to express my appreciation for this committee that you're looking well beyond that, and looking at the quality of care as well as care for younger children. And the last thing I would comment on is that we've worked with some of those other counties who are looking at how to create a child care system that's more family friendly by having a single shared application and single portal of entry. So we've been meeting with, talking with, working directly with several of those counties, kind of on lessons learned and how did they do that. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Well, this concludes our public meeting today. Thank you to community members who attended and who spoke. Thanks to staff and committee members. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.